I opened the letter and saw nursing home deposit confirmed in my son's name. I hadn't agreed to anything. That night he came for dinner acting like nothing happened. I smiled and said, "Honey, I need to show you something." When I handed him the envelope, his face went white because inside was, "Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching, get comfortable and relax, let's begin." The mail slot clicked, the sound as ordinary as the sunrise. 3 envelopes fluttered to the mat. A bill, a flyer for a lawn service, and a thicker, cream-colored envelope with a return address I did not recognize. I picked them up, the paper cool against my fingers. I carried them to the kitchen table, my morning coffee steaming in its usual mug. I opened the bill, noted the amount, set it aside. The flyer went directly into the recycling bin. The 3rd envelope had a weight to it. The paper was expensive, linen weave. The sender was Golden Sunset Continuing Care Community. The name was bland, inoffensive. I slid my thumb under the flap, the glue giving way with a soft tear. Inside was a single sheet of the same heavy paper, a letterhead, a greeting. "Dear Mr. Jeffries," it began. It thanked him for his recent visit and his submitted deposit. It confirmed a preliminary assessment date for his mother, Martha Jeffries, and included an attached packet of forms for her medical history. It was a confirmation letter, a receipt. My hands did not shake. That is what I remember most clearly. They were steady, but they grew very cold, as if the blood had retreated to my core. I read the paragraph again, then a 3rd time. Each word was a small, precise incision. Deposit, assessment, transition. I understood the language. It was the language of solutions, of managed care, of polite disposal. David, my son, he had stood in this kitchen last Sunday, eating a slice of the apple cake I'd made, talking about his daughter's soccer game. He had hugged me goodbye, his jacket smelling of cold air and his cologne. And all that time he had already been here. Not in this home, but in the offices of Golden Sunset. He had toured rooms. He had discussed fees. He had handed over a check or a credit card to hold a place for me. He had done the paperwork. The hurt did not come as a wave. It was a slow, cold seep like water into clay. It filled the spaces in my bones. 43 years in this house. I brought David home from the hospital to this house. I sat with my husband, Walter, on that old sofa in the living room, now reupholstered twice until cancer took him. I paid off the mortgage with money from my librarian's salary, check by check. Every scratch on the floor, every stain on the counter, was a chapter in a book he had decided to close without consulting the author. I heard a noise, a sharp, dry sound. It was the paper in my grasp, crumpling under the pressure of my fist. I forced my fingers to relax. I smoothed the letter out on the table, running my palm over it. Anger would not serve me. Tears would not serve me. They were a luxury for someone with the time to indulge in them. I looked at the date on the letter. The assessment was scheduled for 3 weeks from Tuesday. 3 weeks. He had not planned to tell me until when. The day before, would he have said, "Pack a bag, Mom, we're going for a little ride"? Or would he have let the staff at Golden Sunset explain it to me, while he stood there with a pained, sympathetic smile? I stood up, my legs functioned. I walked to the sink and poured the rest of my coffee down the drain. The routine action was an anchor. I needed to think, and I could not think with the smell of betrayal sitting in my kitchen. I folded the letter neatly, along its original creases. I placed it back inside its expensive envelope. I carried it with me into the living room to the old roll-top desk that had been Walter's. I opened a small, locked drawer. The key was on my key ring, next to the one for the back door. I placed the envelope inside, on top of my passport and Walter's life insurance paperwork. I closed the drawer and turned the key. The click of the lock was definitive. He thought I was a problem to be solved. An item on a to-do list between schedule HVAC maintenance and review quarterly investments. He saw my age, my living alone, and he saw risk and nuisance. He did not see me. He did not see the woman who balanced her own checkbook, who had her own lawyer for her will, who had navigated widowhood and retirement without ever once asking him for money. The sun was higher now, casting a warm square of light onto the rug. The house was quiet, but it was a different quiet. It was the quiet of a battlefield before the first shot is fired. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The initial shock was hardening into something else, something clear and sharp. I would not scream. I would not cry. I would not accuse him the next time he called. He had made his move in secret. I would make mine. I needed information. I needed to understand exactly what he had set in motion. But more than that, I needed to understand my own position completely. My finances, the deed to this house, my legal rights. David was a financial planner. He thought in terms of assets and liabilities. It was time I did the same. For the rest of the afternoon, I performed the normal rituals. I watered the plants on the porch. I made a grocery list. I put a load of laundry in the machine. The normalcy was a shield. Inside, my mind was a filing cabinet, opening drawers, pulling out records. I thought of the papers in the safe deposit box at the bank. I thought of the contact information for Alina Washington, retired judge, my best friend since college. Ellie knew the law. More importantly, she knew the heart of things. When David called that evening, as he did every Tuesday, my voice did not waver. "Hello, sweetheart," I said. "Hey, Mom, how was your day?" "Quiet," I answered, which was true. "Did you have that big meeting today?" I asked, referring to one he'd mentioned in passing the week before. Yeah, it went fine, just stressful, you know." His voice was light, casual. There was no shadow in it, no guilt. That was perhaps the most chilling part. He had done this thing, and it had not cost him a single night's sleep. To him, it was just business. We talked about his children, about the weather. I asked if they were still coming for dinner on Sunday. He said they were looking forward to it. I said I was, too. The lie was smooth in my mouth, a necessary tool. After I hung up, I sat in Walter's armchair, the one I never reupholstered because it still held the shape of him. I looked around my living room, at the bookshelves I built, at the photographs on the mantel. This was not just a house. It was my life, physical and undeniable. He had looked at it and seen a future liability. I looked at it and saw a fortress. I got up and went to the basement. In a corner near the furnace were stacks of labeled boxes, tax records, manuals for appliances long gone, my teaching materials from the library, and one box marked David's school. I pulled that one out. On top was a faded construction paper card, glued with macaroni and glitter. In a child's scrawl, it read, "I love you, Mom. Your house is the best." I held the card. The macaroni was brittle, the glitter long since shed into the bottom of the box. I did not feel sentimental. I felt a profound, clarifying distance. The boy who made that card was gone. The man who replaced him was a stranger who had made a calculation about my life. I placed the card back in the box. I pushed the box back into its place. The decision was already made, there in the cool, dusty air of the basement. He had sent a letter to secure my future. I would send one of my own. But first, I had work to do. The game was on, and he did not yet know we were playing. Days between that Tuesday and Sunday were a study in normalcy. I performed each task with deliberate focus. Grocery shopping for the dinner, a small turkey breast, sweet potatoes, green beans. I chose ingredients I knew David and the children liked. The act of selecting them felt clinical, like gathering props for a performance. I cleaned the house, not with the usual haste before company, but with a slow, methodical attention to detail. I dusted the frame of the photograph of David's graduation. I polished the silverware that had been a wedding gift. I was both the curator of this museum and the principal exhibit. Sunday arrived, bright and clear. I put on a blue dress I knew David thought looked nice. I set the table with the good linen napkins. The house filled with the smells of roasting turkey and rosemary, a familiar, comforting aroma that now felt like a disguise. Their car pulled into the driveway at exactly 2:00. I watched from the living room window. David got out first, his posture straight, his phone already in his hand. His wife, Chloe, emerged more slowly, helping their daughter, Lily, unbuckle from her car seat. Ben, their 12-year-old, was already heading for the porch, earbuds in. I met them at the door. Come in," I said, my smile practiced and warm. "Mom, something smells amazing," David said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. His kiss landed in the same spot as always. I registered the touch as data. "Hi, Martha," Chloe said, her voice always a bit strained. She handed me a bakery box. "I brought a pie." "Thank you, dear. Apple." "Pecan." She gave a small, apologetic shrug, as if bringing the wrong pie was a minor failure. Lily hugged my legs. "Grandma, I drew you a picture at school." "I can't wait to see it," I said, and the genuine warmth I felt for my granddaughter was a small, steady flame in a cold room. The afternoon proceeded along its well-worn tracks. Ben grunted answers to questions about school. Lily showed me her drawing of a house with a huge sun in the corner. David made himself useful carving the turkey, a role he'd taken over after Walter passed. He stood at the head of the table, wielding the knife with competent strokes. "So how, work?" I asked him, passing the gravy boat to Chloe. "Busy," he said, not looking up from the carcass. "We're acquiring a smaller firm. It means a lot of due diligence, long hours." "Due diligence," I repeated. The term sat heavily on the table. It meant careful investigation before a transaction. I took a sip of water. "That sounds important." "It is. It's about protecting the assets." He placed a slice of white meat on a plate and handed it to Lily. I watched his hands. They were his father's hands, broad and capable. They had signed a deposit check for Golden Sunset. "And how are things at home?" "All good." Chloe answered before he could. "The usual chaos. Lily's ballet recital is next week, and Ben has travel soccer every weekend. It's a lot of driving." "I remember those days," I said. "It's exhausting, but you manage it." I turned to David. "You must be stretched thin with all that and the big merger." "Acquisition, Mom," he corrected gently, smiling. "And yeah, it's a lot, but it's good, it's progress." Progress? The word was a key turning in a lock. His progress required efficiency, streamlining, unencumbered movement. A mother in a house she refused to leave was an encumbrance. I cut a piece of turkey. It was moist, perfectly cooked. It tasted like nothing. "This house is so quiet, Martha," Chloe said, looking around. "I don't know how you stand it all day." "I like the quiet," I said. "It's full of my own thoughts, and Mrs. Anderson next door checks in. We have our routines." "That's good," David said, his tone adopting a professional modulation I recognized from when he explained investment portfolios. "It's important to have a social network. Isolation is a real risk factor at your age." There it was, not a slip but a positioning, a statement of fact from the planner's playbook. Risk factor asterisk. I met his eyes. "I'm not isolated, David. I have friends. I have my book club. I go to the senior center for lectures sometimes." "Of course, Mom, I didn't mean it like that." He backtracked, a flicker of something, annoyance, concern, in his eyes. "It's just something to be mindful of as time goes on." "As time goes on," I echoed. "Well, we all have to be mindful of that, don't we?" The conversation moved on to the children's activities. I asked questions, I listened. I laughed at Lily's story about her ballet teacher. But a part of me was detached, observing from a high corner of the room. I studied David's face when he thought no one was looking. I saw the fatigue around his eyes, the distracted way he checked his smartwatch under the table. I saw a man solving problems. I had become one of them. The realization was not a stab, but a cold, solid settling in my stomach. After dessert, while Chloe cleared plates and David helped Lily with a puzzle on the living room floor, I saw my opportunity. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled out a large, leather-bound photo album. I carried it to the coffee table near where David sat. "I was organizing some old things this week," I said, my voice casual. "Found this. Look at this one." I opened to a page near the beginning, a picture of a young David, about 5, sitting on the front porch steps of this house, grinning a gap-toothed smile. The paint behind him was a different color, long since covered over. He glanced at it and smiled. "Wow, that's a blast from the past." "It is. This house has seen a lot, hasn't it?" I let my finger rest on the image of the porch. "Remember how you used to help your father scrape and paint those railings every few years?" "Vaguely. Mostly I remember getting in the way." "You learned, though. You learned how to take care of things." I turned the page. A photo from his high school graduation, him and Walter standing by the rose bush. "This was your father's pride and joy. This house. He always said it was the best investment we ever made, not because of money, but because of the life it held." David's smile became fixed. He looked from the photo to my face. "He was right about that." He was. I closed the album gently. It's more than wood and plaster, it's a history. My history. It's not something you just walk away from. The room felt suddenly quieter. The click of Lily's puzzle piece, the clink of dishes from the kitchen, seemed far away. David held my gaze. For a moment, I saw a crack in his professional veneer, a flicker of unease. He understood I was no longer just making conversation. I was stating a fact. "No one's asking you to walk away, Mom," he said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. It was the tone of someone repeating a line they hoped would become true. "Good," I said, my smile returning, polite and impenetrable. "I'm glad we understand each other." The rest of their visit passed in a blur of leaving rituals. Coats, leftover containers packed, promises to call, hugs at the door. David's hug was firm, quick. "Love you, Mom." "I love you too, David," I said. And I did. That was the terrible, complicating truth. The love was still there, but it was now a separate thing from the man standing before me. It existed in the same chamber of my heart as the betrayal, and the two were at war. I closed the door and turned the deadbolt. The silence of the house rushed back in, but it was no longer the quiet of before. It was charged, purposeful. I cleared the remaining dishes. I washed the good china by hand, feeling the smooth porcelain, examining the delicate gold rim that had survived decades of family meals. He had been testing the waters today, mentioning risk factors, observing my routines. He was in the information-gathering phase of his project. And so was I. His performance had been confident, but I had seen the moment of doubt when I spoke of the house. He did not yet know I had the letter. He believed he was operating in the dark. But I was the one in the shadows, watching him move in the light, memorizing his steps. I dried the last platter and put it away. The kitchen was restored to order. The performance was over. The intermission had begun. Soon the second act would start. But next time I would not be following his script. I would have one of my own. I picked up the pie plate Chloe had left, the sticky remnant of pecan filling clinging to the glass. I scrubbed it clean. The clean kitchen was a blank slate. I did not go to bed. Instead, I went to Walter's desk, unlocked the drawer, and took out the letter from Golden Sunset. I placed it on the blotter. Then I began the real work. First, I needed to understand what David had committed to. I turned on my computer, the fan whirring softly in the quiet house. I typed Golden Sunset Continuing Care Community into the search bar. Their website was professional, filled with images of smiling seniors in bright common rooms and well-kept gardens. I navigated to the levels of care section. Independent living was for those who needed no assistance. Assisted living was for those who needed help with daily activities. Memory care was a locked unit. David had not specified which level he had in mind for me. I was currently in independent living, in my own home. The deposit, according to the letter, was non-refundable after the assessment date. The amount was listed, $5,000. He had paid $5,000 to tentatively remove me from my life. I wrote the figure down on a fresh notepad. Next, I needed a complete inventory of my own position. I opened the small fireproof safe I kept in the bottom of my bedroom closet. Inside were documents in labeled folders, deed to the house, my will, life insurance policies, investment statements from the firm that had managed my retirement rollover. David had helped me choose that firm 5 years ago. I spread the papers on the desk. The deed was in my name alone, clear of any mortgage. My will named David as the executor and primary beneficiary, with small bequests to Lily and Ben. The power of attorney for health care and for finances, both drafted after Walter died, also named David. I had given him the keys to my kingdom, assuming the king was trustworthy. I examined the investment statements. The balances were healthy. I had lived frugally. The statements were mailed to me, but David had online access. He had set it up for me, saying it was more convenient. He could monitor it, he'd said, to help me make adjustments. I had agreed, grateful for his involvement. Now I saw it as a vulnerability. He knew my financial worth down to the penny. He knew the house was paid for. To a financial planner, these were not just facts, they were pieces on a board. The house was a sellable asset. The investments could be liquidated to pay for Golden Sunset. He had all the numbers. He had likely already run the projections. I needed to know my rights. I searched online for elder law and rights of seniors in Pennsylvania. I read about involuntary commitment, which required a court order and proof of grave disability. That was not my situation. I read about powers of attorney. The document I had signed gave David broad authority, but only if I were deemed incapacitated by 2 physicians. I was not incapacitated. Yet the document sat there, a sleeping weapon. The sun was beginning to lighten the sky when I finally pushed the papers aside. My eyes were tired, but my mind was clear, sharpened by a cold anger. I had the facts. I was of sound mind. I owned my home outright. I had financial resources. I had signed documents that could be used against me, but only under specific conditions that did not currently apply. David's plan relied on my compliance or on a gradual, manufactured decline that would justify his intervention. He was planning for a future where I became a passive recipient of his decisions. I needed to plan for a future where I remained the author of my own life. I looked at the clock. It was just after 6 in the morning. Early, but not too early for a leaner Washington. Ellie was a lifelong morning person. I picked up my phone and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. "Martha, everything all right?" Her voice was alert, devoid of sleep. "No, Ellie," I said. My own voice surprised me. It was flat, stripped of its usual warmth. "Everything is not all right. David has made plans for me without my knowledge." There was a brief silence on the line. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted from concern to focused attention. The judge was on the bench. "What kind of plans?" He put down a deposit at a place called Golden Sunset, a continuing care community. I received the confirmation letter. She let out a slow breath. "I see. Have you spoken to him?" "Not about this. He and the family were here for dinner yesterday. He made comments about risk factors and isolation. It was a reconnaissance mission." "Of course it was," Ellie said, her voice crisp. "He's gathering data to support his case. The good son, worried about his aging mother. It's a common script. What do you want to do, Martha?" That was Ellie. She never assumed. She asked for the directive. "I want to make it impossible," I said. "I want to secure my home, my money, and my legal standing so that his plan cannot be executed. I don't want to fight. I want a fortress." "Good," she said. I could hear the rustle of paper, the click of a pen. "Then we need to act, but we need to act correctly. You are not incapacitated. That is your greatest strength. You have the legal capacity to make your own decisions. The first step is to revoke the existing powers of attorney and execute new ones." Who would I name? "Not him," she stated. "Me for health care, if you trust me with that. For finances, we can set up a trust. You can be the trustee while you're competent. We name a corporate successor trustee, a bank to step in only if it's ever necessary. It removes the personal element. It makes it a business arrangement." The concept was logical. A corporate trustee would follow the rules of the trust, not the whims of a stressed son. "And my will." "We update it. We can still leave him the bulk if that's what you want. But we structure it so the house goes into the trust with a life estate for you. That means you have the right to live there until you die, and no one can sell it out from under you. Afterwards, it can pass to him or to the grandchildren. But your tenure is ironclad." It sounded both simple and complex. "I need a lawyer, not the one I used before. He was David's recommendation." "I have a name," Ellie said. "Janice Good. She's an elder law specialist. Sharp, ethical, discreet. She doesn't like it when children try to railroad their parents. I'll call her and set up an introduction. You need to see her this week." "This week," I repeated, writing down the name. "Martha," Ellie's voice softened just a degree. "How are you really?" I looked at the pile of documents on the desk, at the cream-colored envelope. "I am operational," I said finally. "The feeling will come later, I suppose. Right now, I have things to do." "That's the way," she said. "Use it. Let the action carry you. Grieve later when you're safe. Do you have the energy for this?" "I have all the energy I need," I said. And it was true. A new kind of energy was flowing through me, powered by a deep, steady sense of injustice. It was not frantic. It was determined. "Good. I'll call Janice at 9. I'll tell her it's urgent. You gather every document you have related to the house, your finances, and the existing legal papers. Make copies. Be ready to move. We ended the call. I sat back in the chair. The room was fully light now. A new day. Outside, the world was going about its normal Sunday morning routines. I was not. I had crossed a line. The period of shocked observation was over. I had confided in an ally. I had a direction. I began sorting the papers into piles: house, finances, existing legal. I fed them into the small scanner I used for my taxes, creating digital copies. The mechanical hum was a satisfying sound. It was the sound of preparation, of consolidation. David thought he was managing a decline. He was wrong. He had initiated a campaign. And for the first time since the letter arrived, I felt the ground firm beneath my feet. I was not a problem to be solved. I was the opposing general, and I had just secured my first and most important ally. The unsealing was complete. The strategy phase had begun. The meeting with Janice Good was scheduled for Tuesday. On Monday morning, I called Ellie. "Can I come over?" I asked. "I have the documents. I'd like to review them with you before I see the lawyer." "Of course," she said. "Come for tea, 10 o'clock. I packed my tote bag with the folders of copies and the original deed. I drove the familiar route to Ellie's neighborhood, a older development of spacious colonials with mature trees. Her house, like mine, was a testament to a life fully lived. But where mine was orderly, Ellie's was comfortably cluttered with books, art, and the artifacts of a long legal career. She met me at the door, her silver hair in its usual neat braid. She wore jeans and a crisp white shirt. She hugged me, a firm, brief embrace that conveyed more than words. "Come to the kitchen," she said. "The kettle on." Her kitchen was warm, sunlight streaming through the window over the sink. The table was cleared except for a tea tray and a yellow legal pad with a pen laid neatly across it. I sat down and pulled the folders from my bag. "Show me what you have," Ellie said, pouring hot water into a pot. I laid out the copies in order: the deed, the will, the powers of attorney, the most recent investment statement, and finally, the letter from Golden Sunset. I placed that one on top. Ellie put on her reading glasses and picked up the letter. She read it slowly, her expression neutral. She then examined the deed, nodding. She flipped through the power of attorney documents, her lips tightening slightly. "Standard forms," she said, putting them down, "but very broad. The financial one gives him authority over all your assets without any requirement for a doctor's certification of incapacity. It's effective immediately upon signing, though typically only used if you become unable to act. The healthcare one is the same. He could, in theory, use these to start moving money or make medical decisions if he could convince a doctor you were slipping. But I'm not. No, you are decidedly not, but these documents are a vulnerability. They are keys he holds." She took a sip of tea. "Janice will have you execute revocations first thing. That nullifies these. Then we create new ones, now the house." She tapped the deed. "Paid in full. Excellent. A life estate trust is the right tool. You place the house in the trust. You are the lifetime beneficiary. You have the right to live there, maintain it, pay the taxes. You can also be the trustee, which means you control it. We name a corporate successor trustee for when you no longer can. David cannot touch it. He cannot force a sale. After you pass, the trust dictates where it goes. And my investments. We move them. You have the right to change investment advisors. We move your accounts to a new firm. Janice can recommend one. You inform the old firm in writing that David's access is revoked. You change all online passwords. You secure everything." It was a list of tasks: administrative, legal, financial. Each one was a brick in the wall I was building. "And the $5,000 deposit?" I asked. Ellie leaned back, a slow smile touching her lips. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a chess player seeing a move. "That's the interesting part. The deposit is in his name for your benefit. He can't get it back after the assessment date, which is in," she checked the letter, 2 weeks now. "But you are under no obligation to attend that assessment." "So he loses the money." "He loses the money," Ellie confirmed. "Or," she let the word hang in the air. "Or," I prompted. "Or we turn it. The letter is addressed to him." The contract, such as it is between him and Golden Sunset. What if he were to redirect the deposit, convert it into a charitable donation in his name, to, say, the local chapter of the Elder Justice Coalition? It would be a tax deduction for him, and it would send a very clear message. I considered this. It was more elegant than simply letting the money vanish. It transformed his secretive act into a public gesture of atonement, one he never intended to make. It reclaimed the funds for a cause that protected people like me. He would have to authorize that, I said. He would, and he will if the alternative is explaining to you why he made the deposit in the first place. It becomes a condition of any future relationship. This was beyond legal protection. This was strategy. This was the heart of the revenge Ellie had alluded to, not violent, but profoundly corrective. How do we make that happen? You hold the cards, Martha. You have the letter, you have the knowledge. After you have secured your legal and financial fortress, you confront him. You show him you know. You show him the new reality. And you offer him a path to save face and perhaps, eventually, to save the relationship. The donation is part of that path. It's a penance he can perform. I looked at the papers strewn across her kitchen table. They were no longer just evidence of betrayal. They were the components of a counteroffensive. It feels calculated, I said. It is calculated, Ellie replied, her gaze steady. He calculated your future without you. Now you are calculating his choices for him. The difference is your calculation leaves him a door. His calculation for you had only one exit, the door to Golden Sunset. She was right. My goal was not to destroy him. It was to stop him and to redefine the terms of our relationship so it could never happen again. The donation was a symbol of that redefinition. Janice will handle the legal mechanics, Ellie said, writing notes on her pad. You will handle the personal execution. You will need to be calm, clear, and utterly firm. No tears, no rage, just facts and consequences. I can do that, I said. The certainty in my voice surprised me. I know you can. Ellie reached across the table and squeezed my hand. This isn't just about stopping David. This is about you, Martha. It's about you looking at your life, your legacy, and saying, this is mine. I will decide. That is a powerful thing to do at any age. We spent another hour going over the specifics. She wrote down questions for me to ask Janice. She advised me on how to phrase the instructions to my current financial firm. She was my strategist, my coach. When I left her house, the tote bag felt heavier, but my spirit felt lighter. The amorphous hurt and anger had been channeled into a series of discrete, actionable steps. I had a plan. More than that, I had a purpose that was entirely my own. Driving home, I passed the turnoff that would eventually lead to the Golden Sunset community. I did not look down the road. I kept my eyes forward. I was not going that way. I was on a different path now, one I was mapping for myself. That evening, I prepared a simple dinner. As I ate, I thought about the word revenge. It sounded harsh, vindictive. What I was planning felt different. It was reclamation. It was the establishment of a boundary so clear and so strong it could never be ignored again. David had tried to write the next chapter of my life. My response was not to scribble angrily in the margins. It was to take back the pen and write my own. The Council of War was adjourned. The campaign was now underway. The lawyer's office was in a low brick building on the outskirts of town, discreet and professional. Janice Good's reception area was quiet, with comfortable chairs and framed landscapes on the walls. There was no hint of the dramatic conversations that likely took place in the rooms beyond. A young assistant greeted me and led me to a conference room. Janice entered a moment later. She was a tall woman in her 50s, with a calm demeanor and direct gray eyes. She shook my hand firmly. Mrs. Jeffries, Alina has told me a little about your situation. Please have a seat. I placed my folder of documents on the polished table. Thank you for seeing me on short notice. Alina made it clear it was important. Janice sat across from me, opening a fresh legal pad. Why don't you tell me, in your own words, what has happened and what you would like to accomplish? I did not embellish. I stated the facts. I received the confirmation letter from Golden Sunset. My son had made the deposit without my knowledge. I had existing powers of attorney nomming him. I owned my home outright. I wanted to secure my assets and my right to live in my home and to remove my son's legal authority over my affairs. Janice listened without interruption, making occasional notes. When I finished, she asked, "And your current mental and physical capacity?" "I am in good health. My mind is clear. My doctor can provide confirmation if needed." "It may be prudent to have a recent physical and a letter from your physician stating you are of sound mind. It preempts any future challenges. But for today, your own attestation is sufficient to execute new documents." She reached for my folder. "May I?" She reviewed the deed first, nodding. "This is straightforward. A life estate trust is an excellent solution." She then read the existing powers of attorney. Her expression remained neutral, but I saw a slight tightening around her eyes. "These are very broad, standard but broad. We will revoke them today." "What does that involve?" I asked. "You will sign a formal revocation for each one. I will notarize them. You will then send copies to your son, to any financial institutions, and to your primary care physician. It severs his legal authority immediately. The originals should be kept with your important papers." She set them aside. "Now, for the new documents. You wish to name Alina Washington as your healthcare agent." "Yes." "And for finances, you wish to establish a revocable living trust, with yourself as trustee and a corporate successor trustee." "That's what Ellie recommended." "It's a solid plan. You maintain control. The corporate trustee has no emotional stake. They follow the trust document. It removes the temptation for family members to improvise." She chose the word carefully. "We will also draft a new will, which will pour any assets outside the trust into it upon your death. The trust will dictate the distribution." She explained each document in plain language. The durable power of attorney for healthcare, the living trust agreement, the pour-over will. She described the process of funding the trust, transferring the deed of the house, and changing the titles on my investment accounts. "The investments," I said. "My son has online access to the current accounts." "We will include instructions for you to revoke that access in writing today. I can provide a template. You should also move the accounts to a new firm. I can recommend a few fiduciary advisors who are obligated to act in your best interest alone." She made another note. "This is a process, Mrs. Jeffries. It will take a few weeks to complete fully. But the most critical part, revoking the old powers and establishing the new ones, we can accomplish this afternoon." "Let's do it," I said. The assistant brought in a notary. The stack of documents grew. Each one required my signature and initials in specific places. Janice guided me through each page, explaining what it meant. I signed my name, Martha Ann Jeffries, over and over. The pen moved smoothly. My hand was steady. Signing the revocations felt particularly significant. The act was simple, a signature on a line, but it was the first concrete strike back. It was the legal equivalent of changing the locks. After the signing, Janice provided me with a folder of copies and a list of next steps. "You should mail the revocation notices to your son via certified mail, return receipt requested. That provides proof he received them. Do the same for your financial institution and doctor. For the house deed transfer, I'll file the paperwork with the county. You'll receive a recorded copy in a few weeks." I stood, the new folder in my hands. It had a tangible weight. "Thank you, Ms. Good." "Janice, please." She walked me to the door. "Mrs. Jeffries, Martha, what you're doing is smart. It's preventative. It's about maintaining your autonomy. That's not revenge. That's self-preservation. Remember that if you have any moments of doubt." I nodded. There were no doubts, only resolve. From the parking lot, I drove directly to the post office. I used the template Janice provided to write letters to the investment firm, revoking David's authority and online access, effective immediately. I wrote a letter to my doctor, informing her of the change in my healthcare agent. I addressed the envelope to David last. The letter to him was brief and formal. It stated that I was revoking the durable power of attorney for finances and the healthcare power of attorney executed on date. It informed him that new documents had been executed. It did not give a reason. It did not express anger. It was a notification of a change in status. I sent them all certified mail. The clerk handed me the receipts. The paper trails were now official. My next stop was the bank. I accessed my safe deposit box. I added the new legal documents to the box and removed the old will and powers of attorney. I would shred the copies at home. The originals I kept. The revocations made them legally void, but I wanted no loose ends. At home, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. The silence of the house was no longer oppressive. It was the silence of a command center after orders have been issued. I had set things in motion. The bureaucratic wheels were turning. My fortress was under construction. I allowed myself one moment to consider David's reaction. He would get the certified letter in a day or two. He would be confused, then concerned, then likely angry. He would call. I would need to be ready. But I was not ready to have that conversation yet. The legal separation needed to be absolute first. Let him sit with the mystery. Let him wonder what I knew. That evening, I followed Janice's advice and called my doctor's office to schedule a physical. I told the nurse I needed a general checkup and a letter attesting to my mental competency. She booked me for the following week. I also called the financial advisor Janice had recommended, a woman named Susan Choi. We had a brief phone consultation. I explained I was moving my accounts and wanted to sever all previous authorizations. She understood immediately. "We see this sometimes," she said, her voice kind but professional. "It's about maintaining control. We can help." I hung up, the final piece of the initial phase clicking into place. The paper trails were no longer just evidence of David's plans or my vulnerability. They were now the blueprints of my defense, the signed and notarized declarations of my independence. The work was dry, detail-oriented, and utterly empowering. Each form completed, each letter sent, was a brick mortared into the wall. And behind that wall, I was preparing my next move. The confrontation was inevitable. But it would happen on my terms, backed by the quiet, unimpeachable authority of the law. The certified letters were delivered on a Wednesday. David called me that evening. His voice was tense, confused. "Mom, I got some legal documents from you. Revocations. What's going on?" "I've updated my estate planning," I said, my tone even. It seemed like the responsible thing to do. "A heads up would have been nice." I could hear the suppressed frustration. "Why now? Is something wrong?" "Nothing is wrong, but these things should be reviewed periodically. I decided to make some changes." I let the silence stretch for a beat. "Why don't you and the family come for dinner on Sunday? We can talk." He agreed, his relief palpable. He thought this was about estate planning. He thought he could smooth it over. Sunday arrived. I prepared the same meal as before: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, the familiar ritual. The table was set. The house was orderly. I wore the same blue dress. I was calm. The documents from Janice Good were filed away. My accounts were in the process of being transferred. The fortress walls were up. Now it was time to show him the gate. They arrived. The greetings were more subdued. David's eyes searched my face as he hugged me. Chloe was quiet. The children felt the tension and were unusually well-behaved. Dinner was a quiet affair. Conversation was stilted, revolving around safe topics. David asked about my doctor's appointment. I told him it was routine and that I was in excellent health. He nodded, but his jaw was tight. When the plates were cleared and the children had gone to the living room to watch television, I poured coffee for David, Chloe, and myself. The moment had come. "David," I said, placing my cup on its saucer with a soft click, "there's something I need to give you." He looked up wary. "Okay." I reached for a plain manila envelope I had placed on the sideboard earlier. It was not thick. I slid it across the table to him. "What's this?" he asked, not touching it. "Open it." Chloe watched, her hands clasped in her lap. David picked up the envelope, his fingers fumbling slightly with the clasp. He pulled out the single sheet inside. It was not the golden sunset letter. It was a photocopy of an old photograph. The original was in the album in my living room. It showed a much younger David, about 7 years old, sitting on my lap on the front porch swing. We were both laughing, my arms wrapped around him. The sun was bright. The paint on the house behind us was fresh. At the bottom of the page, I had written in clear, neat handwriting, "Remember who you are." David stared at the image. His face went still, then a flush crept up his neck. He looked from the photo to me, his eyes wide with confusion and dawning alarm. "Mom, I don't understand." "I think you do," I said, my voice quiet but clear in the silent dining room. "That boy knew who he was. He was my son. He trusted me. I trusted him." I held his gaze. "I need to know if that man is still in there somewhere." His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The color drained from his face, leaving the flush as two stark patches on his cheeks. He looked down at the photo again, as if it were an artifact from a lost civilization. Chloe spoke, her voice small. "Martha, what is this about?" "It's between David and me," I said, without looking away from him. "It's about trust, and about the plans we make for the people we love." David finally found his voice. It was hoarse. "What plans? What are you talking about?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. The bitterness was bracing. "I'm talking about due diligence, David. I'm talking about assessing risk factors. I'm talking about making arrangements for a future that isn't yours to arrange." His breath hitched. He knew. The confirmation was in his eyes, a sudden, terrified comprehension. He had been so careful, so secretive. He had never considered that the letter would come to me. It was a blind spot in his planning. Mom." He struggled for words, for an explanation, a defense. "I don't want to hear it tonight," I said, cutting him off. My tone was not angry. It was final. "I want you to take that picture home. I want you to look at it. And I want you to remember the boy who lived in this house, who believed his mother's home was a place of safety, not a liability to be managed." Chloe was looking at David now, her expression shifting from confusion to suspicion. "David, what is she talking about?" He didn't answer her. He was still staring at me, a trapped animal realizing the cage door had silently locked behind him. The power dynamic in the room had shifted irrevocably. He was no longer the concerned son managing a situation. He was the son caught in a betrayal. "I loved that boy," I said, my voice softening just a fraction, not with sentiment, but with a stark, painful truth. "I need to know what happened to him." I stood up, signaling the end of the discussion. "It's getting late. The children have school tomorrow." I began gathering the coffee cups, my movements deliberate and calm. The dismissal was clear. David slowly folded the paper, his hands clumsy. He placed it back in the envelope. He stood up, his movements stiff. Chloe rose too, her face pale and anxious. The goodbyes were perfunctory. There were no hugs. David carried the envelope like it was radioactive. He couldn't meet my eyes. "I'll call you," he muttered. "I'll be here," I said, and the phrase held a new, layered meaning. I closed the door behind them and turned the lock. I leaned against the solid wood, listening to the sound of their car starting and driving away. The house was silent again, but the silence now was different from the silence after the letter arrived. That had been the silence of shock. This was the silence after a first, decisive shot had been fired. The confrontation had not been a screaming match. It had been a surgical strike. I had shown him I knew. I had shown him I was not the passive recipient of his plans. I had invoked the ghost of the child he once was, and the ghost now stood between us, a silent accuser. I cleared the table and washed the coffee cups. My hands were steady. The emotional storm I had feared did not come. Instead, I felt a profound clarity. The first move in the personal game was complete. He was off balance, scared, and guilty. He would now have to decide his next move. But for the first time, he would be making it with the full knowledge that I was watching and that I was prepared. The envelope had been delivered. The message had been sent. The waiting was now his. He did not wait long. The call came the next evening, just after 7. I was sitting in the living room, reading. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Hello, David." "Mom, we need to talk in person." "Are you at home?" "Yes." "Then we can talk now. Chloe and the children can hear. They should. This concerns them too, indirectly." I marked my page and set the book aside. There was a pause. I heard him exhale, a shaky sound. Okay, Mom, about the picture, about what you said." "About Golden Sunset," I stated, removing the pretense. Another pause, heavier. How did you find out? The confirmation letter came here, addressed to you but delivered to my address. A clerical error, I suppose, or perhaps the universe has a sense of irony. My voice was dry. It arrived 2 weeks ago. A strangled noise came through the phone. Oh, God. Yes, so you see, I've had time. Time to think. Time to understand what you've done. And time to act. Mom, let me explain, please. His words tumbled out now, rushed and desperate. It's not what you think. I was just planning, looking at options. With my job, with the kids, Chloe and I were worried. We thought it might be a good idea to have a plan in place. For the future. For when you might need help. I do not need that kind of help, and the future is not yours to plan without me. I let the statement hang. You paid a $5,000 non-refundable deposit, David. That is not looking at options. That is executing a plan. You scheduled an assessment. You filled out paperwork with my medical information, which you do not have, so you must have estimated. You moved from thought to action, and you did it in secret. He was silent. I could imagine him in his sleek modern kitchen, gripping the phone, his carefully constructed justification crumbling. My health is excellent. My mind is sound. I have a letter from my doctor confirming that, which I obtained last week. I have revoked the powers of attorney you held. I have executed new ones. I have placed my house in an irrevocable trust with a corporate successor trustee. You cannot sell it. You cannot force me out. My financial accounts are being transferred to a new firm. Your access has been terminated. I delivered each fact like a single, measured tap of a gavel. You no longer have any legal or financial authority over my life, David. That is the consequence of your actions. The silence on the line was profound. When he spoke again, his voice was thin, stripped of its professional confidence. You did all that. I did, with the help of a good lawyer and a better friend. Ellie, he whispered, understanding dawning. Yes, she believes in autonomy. So do I. Mom, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I was trying to help. I was trying to be responsible. Responsible to whom? I asked. Not to me. You were responsible to your own anxiety, to your desire for a neat, manageable solution. You saw me as a problem, David. An item on your checklist. That is what hurts. Not the nursing home, the reduction. He began to cry. I heard the soft, ragged breaths. I felt nothing but a distant, cold pity. His tears were for his own guilt for being caught, for the mess he had made. They were not yet for me. I lost the deposit, didn't I? He said finally, a practical mind even in despair. No, I said. You did not lose it. I have repurposed it. Repurposed? How? Deposit is in your name. The contract is with you. I have contacted Golden Sunset. I explained there had been a misunderstanding, that no assessment would occur. I inquired about converting the deposit into a charitable donation in the name of the depositor. They agreed. It is now a $5,000 donation from David Jeffries to the Pennsylvania Elder Justice Coalition. You will receive a tax receipt. The money will support advocacy for people like me who wish to retain control of their lives. For a moment, I thought the line had gone dead. Then he made a sound, half gasp, half laugh. You donated my money. I redirected the funds from a plan that betrayed me to an organization that protects me. It seemed fitting. Consider it a lesson, paid in full. He had no response. The sheer, audacious completeness of my countermove left him speechless. I had not just blocked him. I had used his own weapon, turned it, and handed it back as a tool for good. This is my terms, David, I said, my voice firm. This is the new reality. You have no power here. You have no authority. Our relationship, if it continues, will be based on mutual respect, not on your paternalistic concern. You will visit as a guest in my home, not as a manager assessing a property. You will speak to me as your mother, not as a client or a patient. Do you understand? Yes, the word was a whisper. I need to hear that you understand the specifics. You will not bring up alternative living arrangements. You will not question my competency without direct, evidence-based cause. You will respect my decisions about my life and my home. Is that clear? Yes, Mom, it's clear. Good, then we have a basis to move forward. It will not be the same. It cannot be. Trust broken is not easily mended. But it is possible to build something new if you are willing to see me as I am, not as you fear I might become. I am willing, he said, but the words sounded hollow, automatic. The understanding needed to sink in to move from intellectual acceptance to emotional truth. That would take time, if it ever happened. We will not have our usual Sunday dinner this week, I said. I think we both need space. I will call you next week, perhaps to see the children. Okay, he sounded defeated. A part of me, a small, wounded part, wished for a fight, for anger. This abject surrender was somehow worse. I have to go now, David. Good night. Good night, Mom. I ended the call. I sat in the quiet living room, the phone in my lap. The confrontation was over. I had stated my terms. I had revealed my defenses. I had transformed his secret plan into a public donation. The power dynamic was not just shifted, it was overturned. The fallout was settling. He was stunned, guilty, humbled. I felt no triumph, only a deep, weary certainty. The battle for my autonomy was won. The war for the relationship with my son was in a fragile ceasefire. The terms were mine. The field was mine. I had reclaimed my agency, brick by legal brick, word by calculated word. The victory was quiet, complex, and utterly devoid of warmth, but it was a victory nonetheless. I had sent my return post, and it had been delivered. The quiet after the phone call was different from any I had known before. It was not the silence of loneliness, nor the tense quiet of waiting. It was the silence of a settled matter. The air in the house felt clearer, as if a storm had passed through and scrubbed everything clean, leaving behind a landscape that was altered, but calm. I did not call David the next week. He did not call me. The space I had demanded became a tangible thing, a buffer zone between the old relationship and whatever might come next. I used it. The legal and financial machinery continued its work. The recorded deed for the trust arrived in the mail. I held the paper, seeing my name and the legal description of my property, now secured within the unassailable framework of the trust. I filed it with the other new documents. My accounts finished transferring to Susan Choi's firm. The process was administrative, but each completed step felt like a stone settling into the foundation of my new life, a life built on my own authority. But a fortress, while secure, can be a lonely place. Ellie called me a few days after my conversation with David. "The dust is settling," she said. "How's the air in your bunker?" "Secure," I replied, "a little quiet." "Then it's time to open a window, or better yet, build a porch." Her tone was practical. "You spent 40 years connecting people with stories, Martha. That part of you didn't go anywhere. Use it." I thought about it. The local community center had a bulletin board. I drove there one Tuesday morning. The board was cluttered with flyers for yoga classes, lost pets, and gutter cleaning services. I took down a faded notice for a dog walker and pinned up a new one I had made on my computer. It was simple, clean text on a white background. Story time for little listeners. A retired librarian invites children ages 3-6 for a weekly afternoon of picture books and songs. In my home, small group, safe, cozy environment. No fee, just bring curiosity. Call Martha to inquire. I included my phone number. It felt like a radical act. I was opening my door, the very door David had tried to plan a permanent exit from, and inviting the outside world in. On my terms. The calls trickled in at first. A young mother from 2 streets over, new to the neighborhood. A grandmother caring for her grandson on Tuesdays. By the end of the week, I had 5 children signed up for the following Tuesday afternoon. I spent the weekend preparing. I moved the coffee table in the living room against the wall. I arranged a circle of cushions on the rug. I selected a stack of books from my own shelves and from the library, classics, and new titles. I baked simple sugar cookies. When Tuesday arrived, I felt a flutter of nervousness I hadn't felt in years. At 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. It was Sarah, the young mother, with her daughter, Alara, hiding behind her legs. Then came Benji with his grandmother, and twin boys, Leo and Sam, with their father. "Welcome," I said, smiling. "Please come in. Shoes off by the door is fine." The children stared, wide-eyed, at the room, the books, the cushions. I sat on my own cushion and patted the ones around me. Shall we begin? That first hour was a gentle chaos. We read about a hungry caterpillar and a bear hunt. We sang The Wheels on the Bus. A cookie crumbled on the rug. Leo had a small dispute with Sam over a particular blue cushion. It was messy and alive and wonderful. When the parents returned, the children were chattering about the stories. Alara, no longer shy, showed her mother how we made spider fingers during a rhyme. Sarah looked at me, her face relieved and grateful. Thank you so much, Martha. It's just what we needed. It's what I needed too, I said, and realized it was true. The following week, all 5 children returned, and a 6th was added. The circle on my living room rug became a weekly fixture. The sound of children's laughter and the rhythmic cadence of a read-aloud story filled the space that had been so silent. The house was no longer just a repository of my past. It was a living room in the most literal sense, a room for living, for community. I did not tell David about it. This was mine, a new foundation separate from the drama of our relationship. But the project began to ripple outward. Sarah mentioned the story time to a friend at the park. That friend called me. I started a second, smaller group on Thursday mornings. One afternoon, Mrs. Anderson from next door stopped by with a plate of lemon bars. I see the little ones coming and going, she said, her eyes twinkling. It's lovely, Martha. This old street needs more of that. We ended up sitting on my porch for an hour, talking about her grandchildren. It was a connection that had been dormant for years, now rekindled. The revenge had been about drawing a line, about securing my borders. But this, the story time, was about expanding my territory in a different way. It was about giving, and in giving, receiving a sense of purpose and connection that no legal document could provide. I was not just preventing an unwanted future, I was actively creating a desirable present. I thought of the $5,000 David had donated. It was supporting advocacy on a macro level. My story time was advocacy on a micro level, advocating for the importance of stories, for intergenerational connection, for the simple idea that an older woman in her home had something valuable to offer. Both actions sprang from the same source, a reclamation of my right to define my own value. One evening, after the children had left and I was vacuuming cookie crumbs from the rug, I caught my reflection in the dark window. I looked tired, but there was a light in my eyes that hadn't been there before the letter arrived. It was the light of engagement. The strategy was complete. The rebuild had begun. I had not just returned to send her the plans made for me. I had composed an entirely new letter, addressed to myself and my community, and marked it, delivered. The rhythm of the storytime weeks became my new normal. I did not hear from David, and after the first few days of watching the phone, I stopped expecting to. The silence was no longer a wound. It was a condition, like the weather. I occupied myself with selecting books, testing new finger plays, and chatting with the parents who now greeted me on the street. My world, which had contracted to the 4 walls of my house and the cold fact of betrayal, was expanding again in gentle, unexpected ways. It was on a Thursday afternoon, after the morning group had left, that the doorbell rang. I was wiping down the small table I used for craft supplies. I assumed a parent had forgotten a jacket or a water bottle. I opened the door without checking the peephole. David stood on the porch. He was alone. He wore casual clothes, jeans, and a simple shirt, not his usual work attire. He held no briefcase. He looked thinner, and there were shadows under his eyes. He did not smile. His posture was not that of a son coming for a casual visit, but of someone approaching a solemn occasion. "Mom," he said. His voice was quiet. I did not step back to invite him in immediately. I looked at him, assessing. This was not the confident planner, nor the guilty man caught. This was someone else. "David, this is unexpected." "I know I should have called, but I was afraid if I called you would say no." He shifted his weight. "May I come in, or we can talk out here?" I glanced past him. The porch swing was empty. "We can sit out here." I stepped onto the porch, leaving the front door slightly ajar. We sat on the swing, a space between us. The chains creaked softly with our weight, a familiar sound. We both looked out at the quiet street, not at each other, for a long moment. "I got the tax receipt from the Elder Justice Coalition," he began. "Thank you for arranging that." It was the correct disposition of the funds, I said. Yes, he swallowed. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past weeks, a lot of reckoning. I waited. This was his to say. I was wrong, Mom, not just about the nursing home, about everything, about how I saw you. He spoke slowly, choosing his words with obvious care. I saw your age, you're living alone, and I saw risk. I saw a problem that needed my solution. I never saw you asterisk. I never saw the person who raised me, who taught me how to balance a checkbook long before I became a financial planner. I reduced you to a set of data points. I'm so sorry. The apology was not defensive. It did not contain the word, but it was a clean statement of fault. I listened, my hands folded in my lap. Chloe and I have been talking, a lot. She didn't know the specifics, but she knew I was managing things. She's angry with me too, rightfully. She made me see how patronizing I've been, not just to you, but to her in different ways. He finally turned his head to look at me. His eyes were red-rimmed but clear. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve that yet, but I wanted you to hear from me that I understand what I did. It was a violation of your trust, your autonomy, your dignity. It was cowardly, and it was wrong. The words hung in the warm afternoon air. They were the right words. They acknowledged the essence of the hurt, not just the action. This was what I had needed that night on the phone, not just an admission of a tactical error, but an understanding of the moral one. Thank you for saying that, I said, my own voice quiet. It matters. I've also been thinking about this house, he said, looking at the porch railings. About what you said, it's not an asset, it's your life. I was planning to sell your life to make mine more convenient. That's unforgivable. It is a very deep hurt, I agreed. The legal steps I took were necessary. They were to protect myself, not to punish you, though I know it felt that way. He nodded. They were smart. They were what I, in my professional capacity, should have recognized as your right to do. Ellie and that lawyer helped you do what I should have helped you do years ago. Plan for a future where you keep control. He gave a small, pained shake of his head. The irony isn't lost on me. We sat in silence again, the swing moving gently. The anger that had fueled me for weeks was gone, banked into embers. In its place was a weary sadness and a faint, cautious thread of something else, the possibility of a new understanding. My story time is going well, I said, changing the subject to something neutral, something that belonged to my new world. He looked at me, surprised, then a real small smile touched his lips. Story time. For young children, here, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I have 2 groups now. His smile grew just a little. It held no condescension, only a dawning recognition. Of course you do. That's wonderful, Mom. It is. It gives me purpose. It fills the house with good noise. He looked down at his hands. I'd like to see the grandchildren again. Lily asks about you, but only when you're ready, on your terms. I would like that, I said. Perhaps you could bring them by one afternoon, not on a story time day at first, for a short visit. I'd like that very much. He took a deep breath. I don't know how to be your son in this new way, but I want to learn if you'll let me. The old way is gone, I said. It was built on assumptions that are no longer true. We can only build something new from here. It will be slower. It will require honesty. And it will require you to see me always as I am. I will try, he said. It was not a promise he couldn't keep, but an intention. That was better. He stood up. I should go, I needed to say those things to your face. I stood as well. I'm glad you came. He hesitated, then leaned in and placed a careful kiss on my cheek. It was not the perfunctory kiss of before. It was an offering. Then he turned and walked down the steps to his car. I watched him drive away. I stayed on the porch swing as the afternoon light began to soften. The reckoning had come. His apology was not a magic spell. It did not erase the hurt, but it was a necessary step. It was an acknowledgement that the ground had shifted and that he was the one who had caused the earthquake. He was now standing in the rubble, asking if we could clear it together. I felt no surge of joy, no warm rush of reconciliation. I felt a quiet, tentative peace. The fortress was secure. The drawbridge was still up, but I had just shown a single, trusted person that it could be lowered under strict conditions. The path forward was not a return to what was, but a slow, careful journey toward what could be. And for the first time since the letter arrived, that journey seemed possible. The weeks after David's visit unfolded with a new, careful rhythm. He did not rush. He called first always. He asked if it was a good time. He brought the children over on a Saturday afternoon, as suggested. Lily ran into my arms as if no time had passed. Ben, now a teenager, gave me an awkward, one-armed hug that meant more than any effusive greeting. Chloe came too, her manner gentle and apologetic. We did not discuss the past. We sat in the backyard, and the children played with an old set of lawn darts I dug out of the garage. The conversation was about school, about the weather, about Lily's upcoming ballet recital. It was surface level, but it was not strained. It was a foundation. David started visiting alone, occasionally after work. He would arrive just as my last storytime group was leaving. He saw the flurry of small coats, the chatter of mothers, the crumbs on the rug. He did not comment on the mess. One Tuesday, he arrived early and waited on the porch. When the last parent left, he came in and, without asking, began helping me gather the cushions and stack the books. "You have a system," he observed, watching me place the books back on their specific shelf. "I do. Chaos requires order," I said. "Can I help?" he asked the next time. I let him wash the small plastic cups we used for juice. He stood at my sink, a man who managed million-dollar portfolios, carefully scrubbing a 3-ounce cup. It was an act of humility. I accepted it. The official paperwork from the county recorder's office arrived on a Tuesday, much like the day the original letter had come. The envelope was standard, government issue. I opened it at the kitchen table. Inside was the recorded deed, showing the transfer of my property into the Martha A. Jeffries Revocable Living Trust. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. The house was mine for my lifetime, its future disposition governed by the trust document I had created. No one could reverse it. No one could sell it. It was the final, unimpeachable brick in the fortress wall. I did not feel a surge of triumph. I felt a deep, settling calm. It was done. That afternoon, David came by. He found me on the porch, the recorded deed in my hands. I did not hide it. "Good news?" he asked, sitting beside me on the swing. "The trust is fully recorded. The house is officially secured." I handed him the paper. He took it and read it slowly. He understood the language. He nodded, a professional appreciation in his eyes. "It's a solid instrument, well constructed. Janice Good is thorough." He handed it back. "I'm glad, Mom, truly. I sleep better at night knowing you've done this." The statement was unexpected. I looked at him. "I mean it," he said. "What I did, it came from a place of fear. Fear of you falling, fear of the phone ringing in the night, fear of not being able to fix it. But this," he gestured to the paper, "this fixes the real problem. It gives you control. It gives me less to fear. It's better for everyone." It was the most insightful thing he'd said throughout the entire ordeal. He had finally understood that my autonomy was not a threat to his peace of mind, but its prerequisite. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" I asked. It was the first time I had offered since before the letter. He smiled, a real relaxed smile. "I'd like that very much." We ate a simple meal of soup and salad at the kitchen table. We talked about his work, about the challenges of the acquisition, but this time he spoke to me as someone whose opinion he valued, not as a mother who needed to be shielded from stress. I told him about a new child in the storytime group who had a stutter but loved to recite rhymes. He listened. After dinner, he helped with the dishes. As he dried a plate, he said, "Lily's recital is next Friday. She's nervous. Would you like to come? We could pick you up." "I would be honored," I said. He left soon after, the easy companionship of the evening a fragile but real thing between us. I locked the door and walked through the quiet house. I stopped in the living room, looking at the circle of cushions still on the rug. I looked at the photographs on the mantel, Walter, young David, our wedding day. I picked up a recent one of Lily and Ben, smiling in matching holiday sweaters. I carried it to the desk in the living room. I opened the drawer where the golden sunset letter had been locked away. I took that letter out now. I unfolded it and read the bland, devastating words one final time. Then I took the recorded deed and placed it on top of the letter. I put Lily and Ben's photograph on top of that stack. I closed the drawer. I did not lock it. The past was not erased. The hurt was not gone. But it was now layered over with new, stronger papers, the documents of my own making and the faces of the future. The return post had been delivered, but it was not just a refusal. It was a complete, revised manuscript. The next sunny afternoon found me on the porch again. Ellie came over, and we drank iced tea. She updated me on her latest bridge tournament. I told her about Lily's recital. "So," she said, setting her glass down, "the walls are up, the drawbridge is down, but on a pulley system you control. How does it feel?" I looked out at my street, at the familiar maple tree, at the children riding bikes in the distance. I felt the solid wood of the porch swing beneath me, the warmth of the sun on my skin. I felt the quiet certainty of the trust documents in my desk, and the warmer, more complex certainty of a son trying to find a new way to be a son. "It feels," I said, choosing the word with care, "secure." Ellie nodded, satisfied. That was the goal. Not happiness, which is fleeting. Not vengeance, which is hollow. But security. The deep, abiding security of a woman who had looked into the abyss of powerlessness and had built a floor beneath her feet so solid she could never fall. The Storytime children would return tomorrow. David would bring Lily and Ben on the weekend. The house would hold its memories and its new, living sounds. I had sent back the plans made for me. In their place, I had built a life, and it was irrevocably my own.